The day I handed my mother a card that could pay for anything, I also told my father to erase my number and never call me again. It sounded cruel, even in my own ears, like something the worst version of me would say. But the worst version of me had already lived through my best attempts to buy love. My name is Evan Mercer. I was 22 when my dad called me a loser in front of a crowd and told me I was on my own. I was 23 when my idea made billions for other people and a fortune for me. I was 26 when he got sick. Boston taught me how to survive. My father taught me what survival was for. Graduation day was a blue sky cliche, the kind you see on brochures, balloons tied to folding chairs, mortarboards zigzagging over the quad, and everybody dressed like a highlighter pen. I had a computer science degree from Northeastern University tucked under my arm, and the foolish belief that the people you love celebrate you when you cross a finish line. My father, Frank Mercer, had a different script. He waited until a few of his old business buddies drifted near the family cluster, men with golf tans and grins that always struck me as a little too sharp. Mom stood slightly behind him, the human version of a flinch, her hand squeezing the handle of her purse like a pressure valve. "Time to be a man," Dad said, not bothering to lower his voice. My father didn't give me a dime when I finished. Neither did his father. That's how you learn. You want to be something, you do it yourself. A few chuckles. One of the buddies clapped me on the shoulder like he'd just knighted me with a credit card bill. I waited for the part where Dad put an arm around me and said he was proud. Instead, he added, almost conversationally, "And don't forget, 4 years, no real job. You think the world owes you. It doesn't. You're starting from zero, son. Consider it a lesson. Better now than when your wife leaves you." It was the word loser that lodged like a fishbone. He said it lightly, a throwaway line that landed like a slap. Grow up. Don't be a loser. The shame came first, burning up my face in front of all those people. Then fury fizzed under my ribs. Then the cement. I locked my jaw and nodded like I was grateful. It's a trick you learn when you grow up with Frank Mercer. If you act like pain doesn't matter, sometimes he loses interest. Mom slipped a folded 20 into my palm when he turned to wave at someone. "For lunch," she whispered, eyes shiny. Later, she would box up some of my clothes, send a small package with an apologetic note. "I know he's tough, but he loves you in his way." Love, in my father's way, had a smell. Aftershave and gasoline, a hint of bourbon. It made everything slippery. I stayed that night on the lumpy couch at my best friend's apartment. Marco and I had hacked together half our assignments and most of our ramen supply for 4 years. He gave me his bedroom, took the floor, told me we'd write the next great thing. Then, a week later, he called from a bus. His aunt in Austin had a room and a let on a job. He left with a hug and a promise to visit. He meant it. Life had other plans. The couch was no longer mine. The door was, literally, closed. If you want to know how fast a degree turns into a blanket, ask a broke kid in a rich city. I rolled it and slept with it under my head. For 2 weeks, Boston Common was my bedroom and the Charles River Esplanade my morning walk. I learned which benches stayed dry, which garbage cans were rated early, and how to fold myself small when the wind cut through the trees. I could afford a day pass at a 24-hour gym on Mass Ave, $10 if you asked the right attendant, and looked like you were doing a short-term trial. I showered there, shaved in the mirror between guys flexing for themselves, and ate dollar menu fast food in the corner of a McDonald's where the outlets worked. It sounds pathetic when you stack it up. It wasn't romantic either. It was logistics. The lowest point wasn't the rain or the night my sneaker soles slipped on a slick of something I didn't name. It was a Tuesday morning. I missed a second-round interview because some kids thought it'd be funny to sprint by and grab my backpack. They didn't get far. I yelled and they scattered, guilt-beating speed, but the strap tore, my laptop wobbled to the ground, and the screen cracked like ice. I could still boot it with an external monitor if I had one. I didn't. What I had were hands, a brain, and the kind of stubborn pride that survives humiliation by turning into steel. On day 13, I walked into a Cambridge office with a lobby that smelled like lemons and money and asked for a job. The company was Alder Biotech, not the pharma giant across the river, not the stealth unicorn with the mysterious founder, but a hungry, practical medical equipment firm that made things people actually used. Portable EKGs, home rehab devices, devices that beeped or buzzed for a reason. They didn't need a software engineer. They needed a QA tech and an IT grunt. I raised my hand for anything. The hiring manager, Rosa Delgado, looked at my resume and then at me. "You were valedictorian of your high school," she said, "and a co-op at a diagnostics lab." "Yes." "Why do you want an entry-level IT support role?" "Because I can do it, and I need to start somewhere." I didn't say, "Because the park benches are getting colder at night, and I will not have my mother meet me in a soup kitchen." Rosa watched me like a puzzle. "You're overqualified." "Underfunded," I said. "Temporarily." She laughed. It wasn't cruel. "Okay, Evan, 2-month contract. Prove you can be useful." "We'll see." I was useful as a human rubber band. I reset passwords, untangled bad drivers, re-imaged laptops, and retrieved files from the shadow realm of corrupted shares. By week 2, I'd quietly written scripts to automate the worst of the busy work and a little demon that detected dying SSDs before they keeled over. It wasn't noble. It made my life easier, and other people's too. And yes, I lived in the office. It started as a dare to myself. One night on the sofa in the conference room we called Glacier because the AC could have stored meat. Then 2 nights, then a week. I stashed my backpack in the ceiling tile above a speaker. I kept a toothbrush in the server closet, tucked behind the rack where the blue light washed the metal like an aquarium. I showered at the gym before dawn, and I wore the same 2 pairs of chinos in an alternating pattern that suggested capsule wardrobe instead of kid with nowhere to go. People noticed without noticing. A product manager, Keisha, made a vampire joke when she saw me shuffle in at 6 a.m. to reboot a build machine. The lab techs slipped me granola bars. No one exposed me. No one had to. The quiet mercy of an office is that if you make everyone else's life easier, they'll let you be a little strange. I learned the building's breathing. The hiss of vents at 2 a.m., the clap of the cleaning crew's carts, the way the automatic lights in Glacier clicked off at 3:07 and back on if someone waved their arms like they were drowning. I loved it. Not the loneliness, but the hum of purpose. At 3 a.m., nobody needed me to be charming. They needed the build to compile. The idea arrived at 3:11 in the morning, like most reasonable decisions, in the middle of exhaustion, when your brain has a tiny hole in it where the fear normally lives. Alder's best-selling device was a home EKG unit. Grandparents could clip on the leads, run a quick test, and upload the results to a portal their physician checked once a week. It worked. It didn't work fast. People had strokes between Mondays. My grandmother died at 69 because her follow-up was on a Thursday. I stared at a wall of Post-its about failed rehospitalization reduction pilots and thought, we're measuring the wrong thing. We're asking old bodies to behave like compliant apps. What if the device was the one that behaved like a grandson? I wrote a memo that was really a short story in technical pajamas. I called it Hearth. The core wasn't the hardware. It was a loop, a wafer-thin skin patch, halo patch, that took continuous metrics, heart rhythm, respiration, temperature trends, hydration proxies, and a bedside base the size of a paperback that paired with it. The base had a pill carousel with locks that opened at the right time and counted what went out. The system learned a person's baseline and flagged deviations in minutes, not weeks. A daughter in Phoenix could get a gentle nudge when grandma in Boston suddenly drank less water or slept 2 hours longer than usual. The GP could get trends in a dashboard that didn't look like it was designed during the Napoleonic Wars. Nurses could do remote checks that felt like conversations, not interrogations. Everything encrypted end-to-end, HIPAA tattooed on its bones. Don't call it AI, I wrote. Call it listening. The next morning, I put the document on Dr. Lila Chen's desk. She was Alder's CTO and the rare kind of executive who read things with a pen in her hand and an open mind. At noon, she appeared at my cave of cables. You wrote this? Yes, ma'am. You're in IT support? Yes, ma'am. She tapped the memo. This is audacious, and it's not impossible. She said it the way you say lightning isn't impossible. By Friday, I was in a room with Lila, Arun Patel from operations, and Miriam from regulatory. We already have prototypes for pieces of this, Lila said. What's new is the loop, the way it learns your normal and looks for your abnormal. If we can validate the signal processing and keep the FDA happy, we have something. I was 22 and slept 3 hours a night and felt more awake than I had ever been. We set up a skunkworks team. My contract became a salaried role with a modest title and more responsibility than my brain could list. My compensation included options, ridiculous I thought at the time, a pretend lottery ticket, and a vesting schedule that I read like it was a legal romance. I spent my days writing code that mattered, and my nights writing code that mattered faster. Lila paired me with Jonah Park, an electrical engineer who could coax signal from noise like he'd made a deal with math at birth. Keisha switched to our project full-time as our product lead and tethered to reality. Rosa protected our time and fed us vulnerability reports when we forgot that bad code leaks in all directions. In 3 months, we had an internal pilot with 10 employees' grandparents. In 6, a clinical partner willing to test a non-diagnostic version with 60 patients under a research protocol. In 9, we intercepted an arrhythmia that would have put a woman in the ICU. Instead, she had a Tuesday clinic visit and a grateful son who cried into my shoulder in the hallway. The thing about building something good is that when it works, it looks obvious, like it had always been waiting for you. Alder went from respectable to blazing. We inked partnerships with 2 hospital systems that vowed to cut rehospitalizations by 15% on certain wards. We weren't saving the world. We were giving a little time back to people who'd run out of it. Wall Street noticed. So did larger fish. A year after I put a story on Lila's desk, Morrison Health, the conglomerate with more lawyers than some small nations, announced an acquisition of a majority stake in Alder Biotech for a number that made board members breathe into paper bags. My options weren't pretend anymore. They vested ahead of schedule, partially in a complicated deal I didn't fully understand, until a nicer bank called me sir. Lila negotiated a carve-out for key inventors and contributors. My name was on 3 patents. I became a co-owner with a sliver that would change my life. The headline that ran on a few industry blogs was misleading but flattering. A kid's patch saves grandma, saves a company. It saved me from sleeping in parks. It did not save me from being a son. My father's voice came back to me through my phone like a chain being dragged across tile. Soft, slow, then suddenly hard. "Evan, your old man," he said as if I had a new one. "Listen, I've been thinking. Family's family. You did good. I didn't say it then, but you did good." My mind supplied the missing words, "and I did not help you." He didn't say those. "Why don't you come by Sunday? Your mother's making pot roast. We'll talk." He was gentle. He didn't need anger to get what he wanted. He needed my relief that he wasn't angry. I went. The house smelled like childhood. Mom kissed my cheek and slipped me a Tupperware for later, as if she didn't trust that the refrigerator in my apartment worked. Dad hugged me with one arm and guided me to the dining room with the other, the way you steer a client toward a contract. He waited until the plates were cleared. "I've got an opportunity," he said casually. "A buddy of mine, Nate, he's expanding. Brilliant vision. Golf lounges with VR rigs, upscale. Old men will line up to pretend they're at Pebble Beach without tearing a hamstring. He needs capital. We're talking a couple $100,000 to start. Nothing to a guy in your position. I could buy 10 of Nate's lounges with the interest I wasn't spending." I could see the pitch deck without seeing it. Sleek, dim lights, overpriced cocktails, and a business model that worked in exactly 2 neighborhoods where the guys with doctors' wives would get bored in 6 months. "Dad," I said, "maybe we can look at the numbers together." He smiled in a way that was almost kind. "Evan, I made my way without anyone holding my hand. You're successful because I taught you to be tough. I didn't get help. You didn't get help. It's how we do it. Now there's a chance to build something together. Don't overthink it. You didn't get help," he said, the way you might say you didn't need love. Mom sat very still, her eyes on the tablecloth. She'd sent me little envelopes of cash in college when Dad forgot to transfer my rent, and then called to ask about the weather like she'd never heard of dollars. I could have said no. I could have asked for a business plan, for an equity agreement, for a sane conversation about risk. I wrote the check. it cleared. Nate opened 2 lounges. The first did okay. The second died in a quarter. The third never opened. Dad called it bad luck in the permitting. When he came around the next time, it wasn't a request. "There's a new thing," he said on the phone. "Skyrise Partners. You know how the rich get richer? They know where to put their money. This is that. You're early, so you get the best returns." The minute he said partners, I smelled a pyramid. Not the illegal kind that calls itself a charity. The legalish kind that calls itself an opportunity, where the opportunity is mostly for the guy at the top. I tried. God, I tried. I mapped out where the returns actually came from and what would happen when recruitment slowed. I sent him 3 articles and 2 videos. I told him I'd put him in touch with a fiduciary who didn't get kickbacks. Dad listened like a man listens to a teenager explaining how Bitcoin works at Thanksgiving. "You young boys don't understand anything," he said, heat finally leaking into his voice. "You had one lucky break and now you think you're Warren Buffett. You think this little computer game you made means you know business." I felt the exhaustion of 100 late nights turn to ash. "If it's luck," I said, "then I wish you luck." I didn't hang up. He did. When he called again a week later with a breathless update about an even bigger idea, I said, "Wish you luck," and this time I pressed the red button. No block, no dramatic speeches. Just enough. I told Mom I loved her. She told me she understood. She did. Understanding doesn't always come with leverage. 2 years passed the way good years do. Quickly, quietly, with the kind of small dramas that don't make good anecdotes. We shipped 2 major versions of Hearth. Halo Patch became thinner, more accurate, more forgiving of the human habit of living messy, imprecise lives. I learned to sleep in a bed without waking to check whether the ice machine had reset its cycle. I dated a woman named Zara for a year and broke up when we realized we were in love with different versions of the people we wanted to become. Lila made me a director with a team that could do what I used to pretend I could do alone. My mother mailed me a scarf she'd knitted in front of old movies and called to ask what modem meant in the article about me she'd clipped for the refrigerator. I did not talk to my father. Then Mom called, and her voice was the voice she used when I broke my wrist in 7th grade. "Your father's sick," she said. No preamble, no softening. "What kind of sick?" "Bad," she said. "The kind with a number attached to it, stage Y4. He didn't want to tell you until we knew. We know." I didn't ask if we meant the 2 of them or the doctors. I asked where he was. She told me Mass General, oncology floor, room number I wrote on my palm because my brain suddenly wasn't taking long-term notes. My father looked smaller in a hospital bed. He still filled the room with his particular gravity. TV murmuring, flowers from no one, a baseball game he pretended to care about. But his shoulders were less sure of themselves. Whatever else he wasn't faking this. "Son," he said like a peace offering the size of a bead, They've got a plan. It's just expensive. The good stuff always is. We can beat it." He said we were a team again. For a moment, I wanted to be 8 and agree and have that be the truth. Mom sat in the visitor chair with a folder in her lap. Estimates, treatment options, printed emails from people with titles that sound like spells. Attending, director of, chief of. The numbers weren't going to bankrupt me. They were going to bruise me for a while and then I'd heal. That was the privilege I had earned and been given by deals made in rooms I now entered through the front door. I thought about 2 years of silence. I thought about pot roast and VR lounges and partnerships that were ladders with missing rungs. I thought about my mother's 1,000 small kindnesses and how love can survive an ecosystem that doesn't feed it. "Dad," I said, and the word felt both accurate and like something I'd outgrown. "You're going to get the best treatment available. All of it. You won't worry about a bill, not one. That's not a question." His eyes flickered with something that wasn't relief. Territory? Control? I couldn't parse it and decided I didn't have to. I turned to Mom. I took out a black card, the kind that makes waiters think nicer thoughts than they should. It wasn't unlimited, nothing is, but for the purpose of this fight, it was. I put it in her hand and folded her fingers around it. "This is yours," I said. "Not his, yours. Use it for everything. If you need a hotel across the street, take one. If you need a car service at 2 a.m., call it. If you need to fly his sister in from Tampa to say the things they never said, do it. Pay for the best. Pay for the second best if the best is at lunch. Pay for the nurse who answers your questions like you're a person. Don't ask me first, just do it. And keep every receipt so I can fight with the insurance company later for sport. My father made a sound between a scoff and a laugh. I turned back to him. And one more thing, I said. When you walk out of here, or when you don't, whatever the end of this is, delete my number from your phone. Don't call me again. You could hear the nurse's shoes squeak in the hallway. The TV waited for a commercial to hit a crescendo so it could fall silent. "What kind of son says that?" he asked, tone finally catching up to the situation, anger sniffing around the edges. "The kind you made," I said. "The kind who learned boundaries late and loudly. The kind who will make sure you live if living is possible, and who refuses to die with you, piece by piece, while you use my love as collateral for your next bet." Mom's breath hitched. I looked at her, ready to fold, ready to rescue her from the middle. She straightened without standing. "I'll handle it," she said softly. I don't know if she meant the bills or the man or the storm. I didn't block his number. I didn't need to. He never called me again. We do not control the hardness of the stories we're written into. We only control how we carry them. The weeks that followed were hospital coffee, bad chairs, and the quiet heroism of nurses who can adjust a chemo rate and a fear level in the same minute. I visited when Mom asked, sat like furniture when that was helpful, and left when it wasn't. Dad had good days and angry days, and a few surprising ones where he told me, bewildered, about dreams in which he was 6, and his father, my grandfather, a man who died before I was born, made him stack wood in the rain. "If you stopped," Dad said, closing his eyes, "he'd count." Counting was worse than the yelling. I did not forgive him because of it. I forgave him a little because of her, the girl version of him who'd learned that if she stacked enough wood, she might not get counted. Mom used the card like a person who had been handed oxygen and told it was okay to breathe. She hired a part-time aide so she could nap. She lifted to the hospital when the tea stopped running. She brought in a nutritionist who looked at Dad like he wasn't a math problem. She declined the private room on the fancy floor because the ladies up here are nicer. She brought the aides coffee. She mailed me receipts and notes in tidy envelopes, like she was sending me slices of a life she wanted me to know. Nurse K helped when your father was mean. Please send her a thank you. And we met a family from Maine who drove down in a snowstorm. I had the cafeteria send soup to their room. "People will say you're buying absolution," Keisha warned me over lunch one day. Not unkindly. They'll be wrong in interesting ways. "I'm buying treatment," I said. "I'm buying my mother's sleep. And your peace?" The truth is, money doesn't buy peace. It buys silence, space, and choices. And sometimes those are the raw materials peace needs to try. Dad did the clinical trial. He did the standard of care. He did the promising thing with a side effect that made him hate everyone for 48 hours. He rallied, he slid, he rallied. He watched Jeopardy and shouted answers he didn't actually know. He asked about Hearth once, and I explained it badly because I was afraid of sounding like I wanted him to be proud. He told me it was fine, which I received like a man receives a shot, necessary, bracing, over fast. On a Tuesday, with the kind of brittle sunlight that makes winter look like a rumor, he called my mother from his hospital phone. I was at work, elbows deep in a regression test that refused to regress. "He wants to talk to you," Mom said. "He said it's not about money." I took the call. His voice was quiet in a way I had not heard in my life. "I wanted to say," he began, and stopped. The pause stretched. "Hospital food is terrible," he said finally, with a huff that might have been a laugh if it had been younger. "Yeah," I said, "it is." "I didn't know it was like this," he said. "When my old man was dying, he did it in a room with green walls, and the nurse wore perfume that made my mother mad. I told myself I'd never be at anyone's mercy. Joke's on me." I waited. He said, "I'm not calling for anything." We were quiet together, listening to the beep that said the machine knew he was alive. "Okay," I said at last. "Okay." It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't absolution. It was a human moment in which we saw each other without our contracts. He hung up. I went back to my test suite and wrote a comment I later deleted because it sounded like a poem. When the press wrote about Hearth 3.0, they wrote about reduced readmissions and better adherence and the business model's shift to service revenue. They did not write about the handwritten note Leela found under her office door from a nurse at Beth Israel. Your device let me call a daughter in time to make it for her mother's last story. They didn't write about the way Jonah cried in the parking garage the first time one of our patches caught a silent arrhythmia in a man who had spent his life moving furniture, then had a silent moment with nothing to move but his fear. Work gave me something to pour myself into that didn't require me to unlearn all at once. Boundaries are easier at scale. JIRA tickets don't remind you of playgrounds. Mom and I developed a rhythm. Sundays at her apartment near the hospital for a late lunch that was always enough food for a week. She'd tell me stories about the volunteers who ran the snack cart like a speakeasy for ginger ale. I set up Hearth for her too. After she'd had a scare with dehydration she didn't mention until after it passed. I'm not a project, she sniffed. You are, I said, and we both smiled. Dad's health went up and down, a graph with fewer spikes over time. There was a day he came home. There was a day he went back. Time conspired to turn extraordinary into routine. In the first spring after his diagnosis, I met him in the hallway while a nurse changed his dressing. He was on the phone with someone, one of the golf-tan men, voice low, trying on the old swagger like a suit that had been altered badly. He caught my eye, ended the call, and looked at me for a long second. You look good, he said. It was an observation, not a compliment. I took it anyway. You too, I lied. He nodded toward the nurse's station. They treat your mother like she's important. She is. He nodded again. You did that. I opened my mouth to shrug it away and shut it. Yeah, I said. I did. We didn't hug. We stood in the blue light of medical compromise and let that stand in for something messy and impossible and, if I'm very honest, bigger than both of us. There is no moral at the end of this that neatens the edges. I did not receive a letter from my father apologizing for the word loser on my graduation day. He did not stand in a crowd and call me son with pride that rang like a bell. What I received was a different kind of inheritance. Evidence that I could build something that listened better than the man who raised me. Proof that I could hand my mother a key to an open door. The knowledge that love, the real kind, sometimes looks like a card placed in the right hand with instructions to take what you need without asking. On a rainy afternoon, months after the day in the hospital when I made my speech about erasing my number, I found myself standing on the Esplanade, the same stretch of river where I used to count ducks while I pretended that the gray sky was a ceiling I'd chosen. I watched a woman in a red coat hold a paper cup for her father. He drank and wiped his chin with the back of his hand the way men who were taught not to ask for help always do. She didn't flinch. She dabbed his shirt with a napkin like she was polishing silver. People will tell you that choosing yourself is selfish. They don't tell you that choosing yourself is the only way you can keep choosing other people without turning into a ghost. When I think about my father now, I don't see graduation. I see my mother's hands around a black card and my own hands letting go. I see a blue hospital room and a man who didn't know how to stop stacking wood even when there was no wood to stack. I see a line in the sand that looks from a certain angle like mercy. Did I abandon him? Did I finally refuse to abandon myself? Maybe in the end both were true. Maybe in the end that's what enough means.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and explore our channel for more love, betrayal, and redemption tales.